This week, we look at how you can run a security and privacy safety check on iOS and whether Touch ID will be back on the iPhone 15, as well as hacking Google and the demise of Facebook. Welcome to Straight Talking Cyber.
iOS 16's been out for a little while now, actually nearly a month when this video goes out. I've been trying out some of the features in iOS 16. It doesn't, like, on the surface seem like a big change in terms of privacy, and maybe security is bigger, but in terms of privacy as the other iOS versions, especially iOS 15. But I found something quite cool with safety check. So headline features of safety check are kind of touted by Apple as something to protect people who may have abusive or controlling partners, other people who may physically, have access to your iPhone or may have kind of given themselves access. But actually, it allows you to manage sharing and access for your apps as well. So what I've been doing is going through, seeing what apps have access to what, and then you can just revoke it. And it's very, very simple and easy to use.
So does this basically bundle together app permissions and just make it easier to use?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. So basically you get a list of all your apps, including Apple's apps as well, and what they have permissions to use. So some things will need access to your camera, like a lot of the apps that you might post photos on, for example, but maybe a location access app doesn't. Sorry, that's the wrong thing to say. A map access app or something like that will not need access. It will need your location, but it won't need access to your camera. So you can revoke those in case any apps have access to things you really don't want them to. Which
does it show Apple's apps as well as third-party apps?
Yes, it does. That's what I was saying, actually. So first of all, you get Apple's apps and what they have access to, which is good because it shows that Apple is actually saying, well, here's our apps too, not just everyone else is doing bad stuff. And then you get all the other apps that you have as well. And then the third step is you can improve your security. So you can review your passcode. Maybe your passcode isn't that secure. You can change that quite easily and see what other security things you have. So it's a quick little privacy check, the safety check, not just for kind of people who might be at risk from abusive partners.
So I guess you could look at this as being a halfway house, a stepping stone between your default iOS setup and the full lockdown mode in iOS 16.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of could say that, but I'd say lockdown is like, whoa, extreme. You can't use anything. And this is a way of reviewing your privacy settings. So, if you want to give access to apps, then you can, but it's a good idea not to give access to things they don't need. It's as simple as that. And kind of with that in mind, just quickly go on, use it now, have a look. It's in your privacy settings, and it's very easy to use.
It's like there's a binary here, isn't there? I mean, Apple has this privacy trusted mantra that it pushes out, and it's done a brilliant job in terms of convincing everyone that it's privacy first. It's come under flack recently for its pretty fulsome adherence to law enforcement requests for data. You spin side of that, you look at someone like Signal, and we'll all wax lyrical about Signal because it doesn't collect data and provide it, and Apple does, but yet, we're all happily let our iPhones collect lots of information around us. Significant locations is always a big one where, former police officers talk about the fact they're getting somebody's phone. And even though Apple doesn't have the data's there. And if the data's there, the data is at risk of in one way or another. It's just an interesting, it's not quite as locked down as many people might assume.
Yeah, and it comes down to trust, really, and that's what Apple's marketing is all about. Trust us, trust Apple, use Apple, and don't use Google phones. And it works. It does work very well. But like you say, important to kind of call out that Apple isn't perfect when it comes to privacy either.
It's a responsibility for your own privacy and security, right? And that ultimately, it doesn't matter what Apple does, you as a user have to decide where you want to draw the line. And the stuff you're talking about, these new features, just give the tools. But if you don't use the tools, massive waste of time.
And talking about Apple and being the trusted option and known for its security, this is one that might interest you, Zach, I'm guessing, given your business interests. We're all used to using Face ID because we've got no choice on modern iPhones. But there has been a lot of talk about whether Touch ID will come back for the iPhone 15. And indeed, now we learn that Apple has been testing in-screen fingerprinting, so an in-screen Touch ID system. But according to Mark Gurman from Bloomberg, who's well known for getting a lot of Apple tech rumor bang on, although they've been testing this, they're not going to bring it back, which I think is a bad thing. What do you reckon?
It's interesting. I mean, I think there was a big furor about it mid-COVID, and everyone was walking around with masks, and then they kind of dealt with that with some pretty dodgy mask detection, which doesn't really work, or doesn't work as often as it should, and it's basically just seems to be just dropping the threshold. It's a really hard one, isn't it? Because I guess it compromises the physicality of the device. I mean, Apple has done more to promote facial recognition as an identity assurance technology. You know, if you look at Apple Pay, particularly in the US, and what that's done to drive contactless payments, biometrically secured. I mean, now I'm sure I'm not the only one when you go to an ATM, in the very rare occasions you need, you know, cash these days, you're very aware of the lack of biometric security because it secures, you know, so much now. And Face ID is brilliantly stitched into the way an iPhone works across everything, and Touch ID is clumsier. It is a clumsier technology in terms of it interrupts just the flow. And I suspect some of this is just user experience, and they just can't get that user experience right.
I mean, my take on this is I'd actually quite like both. Certainly, many high-end Android devices give you both, and I like the idea of having both as an additional security measure. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. You could use Touch ID and Face ID to give 2 layers of authentication to apps and securing your data, which I think would be a great thing for Apple's security branding.
Yeah, I agree with that, definitely. And also, you could actually put Touch ID somewhere else on the phone, so they could kind of work seamlessly at the same time. I mean, obviously, it's in the home button in the iPhone SE. But what about having it kind of on the side button where you can just hold that plus have your face in place? I mean, it should be easy and functional and secure. Another thing on the Apple factor, I guess is good to mention, is that Facebook has been doing, I shouldn't be laughing while I'm saying this, but Facebook has been doing very badly of late. First of all, we've had a lot with the revenues, because revenues have actually been declining, and we've seen user numbers decline for the first time earlier this year. Now what's happening is Mark Zuckerberg seems to be making quite big cuts in terms of what they're spending on the metaverse, which was their big area of investment, and also in terms of employees. He's basically saying, you know, if you want to leave, like, please do, because they're going to have to be making redundancies. And one of the biggest reasons for this is Apple's privacy features. We've all talked about it, but it's actually had this impact on Facebook that's been more than just market conditions, which other people are suffering from.
Business model, Facebook's business model is atrocious. It is, you know, it mines data. It's intrusive, it's invasive, it mines data, it tracks you across the internet. They got away with it for a long time. You know, Apple happened to kind of wield the axe on it, but it was going to come. I think, you know, even Google's kind of reluctantly following on to an extent. You know, it's just not acceptable 2022 to just, you know, to invisibly mine data in the way that, you know, we've seen for a decade or more.
Yeah. And on the Google factor again, Google has been putting some changes into Chrome, which have really been annoying some people. I think most people who use Chrome, especially with ad blockers, have heard of Manifest v3, which is a change to the web request API, which is coming in 2024. So timelines have been set, and we're actually going to see the first versions coming to the beta and canary versions of Google from January next year. So it's starting to roll out. Then from February, any extensions that actually use the old API won't be actually allowed in the Chrome store anymore. So basically, this has caused big, big problems, because Google says it's for privacy and security reasons. It's not. I mean, the EFF has come out and said some stuff, but Google's model is based on advertising, and this is really not good.
I mean, you can make. I mean, every user needs to know you can make Chrome significantly more secure by not using it, and using something else instead. Yeah. But you're right. You do. You know, Chrome is not there as a public service to allow people access to the web. It's there because Google is its front window, right? It's how it advertises. You know, tracks user, gathers data, pushes promotions and advertising, makes a fortune. So you know, use it with that in mind, right? And the thing about Chrome that's always I found the most disturbing is maybe a strong word, but maybe it's the right word, is that it's really quite hard to set Chrome up to be kind of security and privacy focused. It's not by default. You have to really go in and try. You really need to know what you're doing, which runs counter to what we're seeing, particularly with things like Firefox and Safari, where they have become ever more private and secure out the box.
Yeah,
and if you're gonna go Chrome, then don't necessarily use Google Chrome. Use a Chromium-based browser. So something like Brave, for example, which has been doing really well of late in the privacy stakes.
Yeah, exactly. But then you've got to be careful with Chromium-based things, because we don't know which ad blockers are going to work on those as well, because obviously they're based on the same engine, which is a problem. So we'll have to kind of see what happens with that.
Although with Brave, of course, it's all built in, so you don't have to worry about extensions, which is quite a useful thing.
But it's interesting your point, Kate, on business models, right? I mean, Google's flying and Facebook's struggling, and you know, not to put to jump point on it. The Google Pay plays kind of poacher and gamekeeper at the same time. It owns the device, owns the access point and the back end, whereas Facebook is sitting there relying upon other people's access points. And we saw, and the metaverse point is interesting because we saw Zuckerberg a while back. I mean, clearly they have clocked this for some time. That you know they need to own the access points of some description, whether it's a device or the metaverse, whatever that is. They have to control the journey. Otherwise, they don't own the user, and they're relying upon an Apple user or others. And you know, if you know the scale of Facebook and what it's built on advertising, to try and do that a different way in the world we're in, when you've got access primarily controlled by Apple and Google, if we're being realistic, that's probably an impossible ask.
Yeah, it's a scary world to live in, isn't it? And also talking about Google, Davey, I think that you've been watching some interesting videos on the inside Google security. What's happening?
Yeah, Google's this week has released a documentary video series on YouTube called Hacking Google. It's not a masterclass in breaching security defenses at Google, I should point out, but rather it's an insight into how the different security teams within Google protect the business from cyber attacks. So you've got things like the threat analysis group, Project Zero, which are always discovering zero-day vulnerabilities and exploits, both within Google's products and others external to Google, and their red team, which is the really interesting thing for me, because the latter, the red team, actually do hack Google. They attempt to hack Google using the same techniques that real attackers would. Although there is something called scope, which every pen testing outfit will know about, and the things that are outside scope for the red team at Google. Of these, the one that amused me the most is apparently you're not allowed to chloroform security guards. But I'll be talking more about this this week in one of my pieces on Forbes, looking at exactly what they're covering. But there's also, if you do actually watch, there's 6 videos. If you watch all 6 videos, at the end of it, you can enter a capture the flag, bespoke capture the flag event that Google are doing, and you need to solve 24 puzzles, and the clues to those puzzles are hidden within the videos, just to give it an extra edge for would-be hackers.